In this video, I'm going to share 3 reasons why I think a prime lens is superior to a zoom lens. Hi guys, my name is Matti Sulanto and I'm a photographer. And I'm also a prime shooter, as you probably know if you've been following my channel. And in this video, I'm going to share 3 reasons why I think prime lens is superior to a zoom lens. But then I have one reason or one scenario where I think a zoom lens is always superior to a prime lens. But bear in mind that these are my opinions on this, and I fully understand that some of you may have some different opinions on this. And as a matter of fact, if you do have a different opinion, please do share it down below in the comments. I'd like to hear that. But now let's get into it, and the reason number 1 is the size. A prime lens is always smaller than a zoom lens. And I'm going to explain it by comparing these 2 tiny lenses that I have. The lens in my right hand is the Lumix 12 to 32mm zoom lens, which is really small. And the lens that has a fingerprint on the front element in my left hand is the 20mm f1.7 prime lens. When you first take a look at this, you would think that the zoom lens is much smaller, this one here. But when I extend this zoom to its working length to about 20mm, you can already see that the zoom lens is much longer than the prime. And also the fastest maximum aperture on this zoom is about 3 stops slower than the maximum aperture on this prime lens, this 20mm f1.7. And 3 stops is a lot. It's the same as cranking up your ISO from 200 to 1600, 200, 400, 800, 1600. And that is a lot. And yes, I know that a zoom lens is more versatile because it has multiple focal lengths. But I'll get to that a little bit later in this video. And now back to the maximum aperture. With this 20mm f1.7, I can work a lot better in low light situations, and I can also use a little bit of that selective depth of field for my creative purposes if I shoot at wide open f1.7 aperture. With this zoom lens, I don't have much control over the depth of field. And there are some fast aperture zoom lenses too, but they tend to be really big. For example, the Panasonic Leica 10 to 25mm f1.7, which has the same maximum aperture as this prime lens, this 20mm. That zoom lens is really huge. Unfortunately, I don't have it here, so we could compare the size. But anyway, it is really huge. So the number 1 reason is the size. Prime lens is always smaller than a zoom lens. And the reason number 2 is the optical performance. Prime lenses tend to be much better, or at least better optical performers than zoom lenses if we compare lenses from the same category, say professional lens versus professional lens. Of course, a consumer grade prime lens may not be as good optically as a professional zoom lens, but even in that case, the consumer prime lens probably has faster maximum aperture for its advantage. Prime lenses usually have a simpler optical design compared to a zoom lens, and therefore they usually perform better. They have less chromatic aberrations, less distortions. They usually behave better in backlight situations, and in general they are better optically. But like I said before, there can be some exceptions if we compare a consumer prime to a pro zoom lens or something similar. And let's not forget about that faster maximum aperture that can offer a lot to your photography in many scenarios. And the reason number 3 is that a prime lens is so much easier to work with compared to a zoom lens, because a prime lens only has one angle of view, and you can quite quickly learn to know that angle of view, and you can learn to pre-visualize your pictures even without a camera. With a zoom lens you have multiple focal lengths, multiple angle of views, and it can take a lot of time, and I would go as far as to say that you can never really learn to know your zoom lens as well as you can learn to know your prime lens. So more is not always better. Sometimes it's good to have some limitations, and that can give you much better results. And I can fully understand the convenience of a zoom lens, and sometimes I too use zoom lenses and I get really good results, but most of the time I get much better results when I only work with one prime lens. And some of you are going to comment that with a zoom lens you can capture more, but it's not true. Even with a zoom lens you can never capture everything. While you are zooming in for that bird in the tree, something can be happening right there in front of you, but you can't see it because you are zooming for that bird in the tree. So you can never capture everything, no matter what kind of a zoom you have. However, there is one scenario where I think a zoom lens is always better than a prime lens, and that is when you need a long telephoto lens. And by long telephoto I mean something longer than 100 or 150 millimeters. And the reason why I think a zoom lens is better in these long telephoto situations is that with a long telephoto you are usually trying to capture something that is relatively far away. And there might even be something in between you and your subject. Maybe there's water, there's some terrain that you can't cross. Or if you're shooting wildlife, you are in a hide maybe, or if you move you can scare your wildlife away. And if you are shooting, I don't know, a distant landscape or something, it doesn't make much difference if you take 10 steps here or there. The composition and the framing is going to be pretty much the same anyway. If you're using a shorter focal length and you are close to your subject, a few steps here or there can make a big difference in the angle of view or the point of view. And one other thing is that if you are in that long telephoto range, the perspective or the look in the picture is going to be pretty much the same if you shoot at the 200 or 300 millimeters. You're just going to change the framing a little bit while you zoom in or out a little bit, but the basic perspective or the look in the picture is still that compressed telephoto look. So a zoom lens makes a lot of sense in those long telephoto situations, and a long telephoto shooting situation is so much different from, let's say, street and documentary type of shooting that I normally do. So there you have it, 3 reasons why I think a prime lens is better than a zoom lens, and 1 reason or 1 scenario where I think a zoom lens is better than a prime lens. And like I said at the beginning of this video, please do share your thoughts on this in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.